today. Bigger group than normal. Hope everyone remains safe and healthy. Thrilled to have client Sean Sweeney, assistant coach with the Pistons, leading discussion on attacking, switching defense, full court offense. We will speak for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Then we'll open it up for discussion. Want to keep this interactive. So somebody has a question, please, unmute your button and feel free to speak up. Please identify yourself when asking a question or making a point. And without further ado, Mr. Sean Sweeney, the floor is yours.
Brian, thanks a lot. Hello to everyone. As Brian mentioned, going to be talking about full court offense, penetration game, and attacking switches. And I'm going to share my screen because I have a few video clips and an outline. But if anybody has any questions, just tell me to stop, ask away. And a little bit of background about myself. Coached in college for 5 years and then started in the NBA as a video coordinator, and have worked with a lot of good people. And what I talk about today, I'm not Paul Westhead, I'm not Mike D'Antoni, I'm not George Karl. I've worked with some guys who really influenced me, and I've watched a number of different coaches do things that have influenced me. So I'm going to give you guys some thoughts on, in particular, like I said, the running game, penetration, and attacking switches. And I'm going to share my screen now and get going here. So if you guys have any questions, like I said, please fire away. Hope everybody can see the screen here. Everybody can see it?
Yep. Got it, Sweeney.
Okay. So I think just in general, as we talk about, the running game or offense in general, defense, we've got to define what we want on a possession. And in particular, our shot selection. How are we going to define what a good shot is and what do we want our guys to do? And in the NBA, how do we do that as soon as possible is oftentimes really critical because of how good the defenses are. So whether that's a shot at the rim, a free throw, a corner three, and above the break three, whether a good shot is you being open and ready. If you define a possession as a possession where we need our best player to shoot the ball or to get the best shot, how you define what a good shot is very, very critical. When we talk about why we want sooner the better, a couple data points stand out with that. Number one, in the NBA, the average transition offense scores 1.26 points per possession, and the worst transition offense in the NBA scores 1.14 points per possession. Now, compare that to the average half-court offense. You're going to look at 1.09 points per possession on average, and the best half-court offense is at 1.16. Another important point is you see here shots taken by shot clock range. If you shoot within the first 6 seconds of the clock in the NBA, on average, you're shooting just about 53% from the floor. Compare that to the last 6 seconds, you're shooting just about 38% from the floor. So 15% difference there. Now, why is that? There's a few reasons, but a couple that stand out to me. Number one, early in the clock, the offense has the advantage. And as we look at the video on that, couple things stand out. One is if you run, you can get behind the defense, as you see here. This is a break that is 3-on-3, but because the wing runner here gets behind the defense, they can get an easy shot. You can get a numbers advantage. 5-on-4, 4-on-3, 3-on-2, 2-on-1, whatever it may be, you can get a numbers advantage in transition. So here off the miss, one of the greatest running teams of all time, pushing the ball, getting a 3-on-2 advantage and an easy basket. Now, if you've got multiple guys who can handle the ball, that gives you an advantage as well. You can push here, as we see, and get a 5-on-4 break and an open three. Whether you run on a make or a miss, you see here at the beginning of this play, offensive player shoots a layup and falls down, and immediately we've got a 5-on-4 advantage. So the offense, by getting into the front court quickly, is able to have an advantage over the opposition. Another advantage that you can get is the early cross match or the early mismatch, as we see here. And although Miami doesn't necessarily get a quick shot, they're into the front court in the scoring area very early on. And now we see a dynamic, all-time great shooting guard posting up against the small, causing help and getting an easy basket for his teammate. Now, there's a few musts when it comes to the running game that I think really stand out. Number one, you've got to have fundamentals and habits, whether that's first 3 steps mentality, being able to pass and catch, dribble, shoot, finish, whatever it may be. You've got to have great fundamentals and habits. And I think conditioning, as we all know, is critical to the running game, because if you want to defend and run, you've got to be in great shape. Second thing you've got to have is you've got to have purpose. Why are we running? Are we running for layups? Are we running for threes? Are we running to explore early in the clock? Why are we pushing the ball? Another thing we need that's critical is unselfishness. The 2 best ways to be better as a team: play hard, pass the ball. So the more we can play together, the better off we're going to be. A 4th must we need to have is we've got to see the game. Are we up a man? Do we see where the defenders are? Do we see where our offensive players are? Whoever has the ball has to be able to see the game and make good decisions. In my opinion, right now, the game is a game of playmakers and decision makers. So you need those guys on your team. And then lastly, we've got to know who we are and play to our strengths. Some examples of those things here would be a good example of fundamentals: getting that ball up the floor. You see here, John Wall for Washington is getting the outlet almost at half court. And you see here in the right corner, the shot clock is still at 23. So that ball's over half court in 2 seconds. And now he does a great job of making, obviously, it's a hell of a pass here with his left hand, but it's on time, on target, and the shooter is ready to shoot on the catch. So we've got good fundamentals on that play, and we're doing that at a great speed. Another example of a fundamental here would be Garnett running ahead of the play. Although he's not going to get the ball, he's able to seal the defender, allowing Williams to get into the paint, and then again, seeing the game, making an on-time, on-target pass, and then Pierce being down and ready to shoot. If you go back to look at Pierce here, you see he's down and ready, his feet are organized, and he's stepping right into his shot. Talked about purpose. Here's a good example of a rim runner looking to post and seal early. And if you're not a guy who can catch and finish, then there is no purpose for you to seal at the rim. But if you are a guy who can catch and finish, it gives you a great opportunity to score the ball. So what is our purpose? Another example of purpose would be getting to the corners. Why do we want to get to the corners? Well, in this case here, you see Solomon Hill on the left side of the floor is not a rim runner. He's not a physical presence at the rim. So his purpose would be to get to the corner to, 1, get a good look at a shot, but 2, put the defense in a tough position. We've essentially got a 2-on-1 opportunity here. And by getting to the corner, gets a great look at a 3. Unselfishness is critical as well. And this is a great example of drawing the crowd, but not playing in the crowd. John Wall again here gets the rebound, is looking to push, and you see the crowd he draws by attacking, knowing that once he draws those guys, making the unselfish play to the shooter running to the corner. Another example of unselfishness here, and although there isn't an easy early basket, the way this ball moves, guys being unselfish, willing to move the ball without hesitation, gets Pierce a great look at another 3 here with Minnesota's center closing out on him, having to leave the paint. Seeing the game. Who's open? Great example here. Wall attacking, getting into the front court early with 21 or 20 on the clock. And he sees once the paint is vacated by the defense, Gortat is open, and it's an on-time, on-target pass. He's able to deliver the basketball to a teammate and get him an easy look. Another example here would be by cutting on the weak side here. You see Gallinari cutting to the rim. This draws the defense, and Andre Miller is able to see that, understand that it's going to suck in the weak side here, and pass the ball to an open teammate who can walk into a three-point shot. Another example here of seeing the game. Kennard here at the top of the screen is running hard. Calderon with the ball sees he's behind the defense and is able to make that pass. Now, one thing that Kennard does here is he's able to be a play ahead, knowing that his teammate's going to be in the corner, and without hesitation, deliver a great pass to a shooter who's run to the corner. So this is a great example of having fundamentals, having purpose, and seeing the game playing unselfishly. And then the last point here would be knowing your strengths. If you're an all-time great like Magic Johnson is, you know that you can get coast to coast and attack the smaller defender who's on a retreat. You see him running back, getting to his strength. If you're a shooter whose best attribute is being able to space the defense and knock down open shots, it may be walking into your shot. Another example here would be Iguodala at the bottom of the screen. He's not a rim runner. He's not a guy who's going to look to post. So he's going to run to the corner where he's best shooting the ball, and also because he's a cutter, he's going to try to get to a great spot on the floor, and that's going to give Dragic here the opportunity to attack the paint early. So knowing your strengths and playing to them is critical. Now, a few questions that I think are really important to ask, and as one of the guys who got me into the coaching profession would say, is the essence of offensive basketball. Who am I? Who is my teammate? Who's covering me? And who's covering my teammate? We've got to know who we are. We've got to know who our teammates are. And then we've got to know who's guarding us. And it's our job as coaches to help our players understand who they are and how best to succeed. Some questions that you've got to answer and ultimately ask to help your team. Who can handle the ball for us? Are we a team that needs our point guard to handle the ball? Can we have multiple players handling it? And then ultimately, when they bring the ball up the floor, where do we want them to bring it up? Do we want them to center it? Are we a team that wants the ball on the side? Where do we want that ball? And then are we running a numbered break with specified lanes like a Paul Westhead or a Sonny Allen? Or can anyone fill the lanes? How positionless are we on the perimeter? And how do we want to fill those spots? Is it better for us to just get out, ride, and run and figure it out from there? Or do we want 2 going to the left side, 3 going to the right side, etc.? If our bigs are ahead of the ball, do we want a rim runner? If you're in Milwaukee or Memphis, you've got 5 guys running to perimeter spots most times, trying to spread the floor because of your shooting. If you're in Detroit and you had Andre Drummond, you wanted a rim runner looking to seal. And then after that rim runner runs the floor, where does he go? Is he allowed to post up? Is he a threat like a Blake Griffin would be? Or do you want him to get out opposite the ball? And then do you want him spacing in the dunker or on the perimeter? Another question that you have to ask yourself is, do we have the players that allow us to throw the ball ahead? The more decision makers and the more playmakers you have, the easier it is to throw that ball ahead and look to attack early. And then the last thing is we've seen more and more teams go to putting 5 shooters and 5 players who can dribble, pass, and shoot on the floor, is how interchangeable are our positions. So we've got to make sure that we can answer these questions about our team so that we can best attack, especially early in the clock, because the faster we play, the more we've got to understand who we are and have great fundamentals. Now, if you're not able to score on that initial break, the question becomes, what do we do next? And there's a lot of great options. You can play early pick and roll game, running drags and double drags. You can do your different early offense actions, whether it be pistol, quick pin downs, staggers away, whatever it may be. You can call a set play. But regardless of what it is, you've got to be able to flow from your early transition attack into your half-court offense. A great option, in my opinion, is the penetration game. Couple data points to that end.
Hey, Sean.
Number one. Yes.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
You know, we see a lot of teams now, after they contest, they just continue down to the other end. Is that something you would promote? Would it be conditional? Would it be, you know, like after a switch, Blake can sprint and bury a small like he used to with the Clippers? Yep. Do you have any guidelines for that?
Charles, I think it goes back to personnel like anything else. If you're the Lakers and you have Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and a 5 on the floor, and you're more likely to secure the defensive rebound, that leak out can be a big-time weapon. And they get 1 to 2, you know, touchdown passes per game. You know, if you're a team that doesn't rebound the ball as well, then it may not be as good an option. So, you know, as we know, it's personnel-based, but to me, one of the big indicators on whether or not to do that would be how well you can rebound the ball. Because if you can rebound it well with 4 guys because of your size or because you've got great rebounders, then it might be something worth looking at. If you can't rebound the ball, then it may be better to challenge the shot, come back in, present yourself for that long rebound, and then run. Does that make sense, Charles? I'd ask you guys too if you guys have any thoughts on that. But that would be my initial thought on it. Going back to driving the ball early, the penetration game. In the NBA, if you drive the ball in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock, you're looking at 1.17 points per possession. And that's significantly better than if you drive it in the last 14 seconds of the clock. And one other point I think that's critical is you've got a better chance to get fouled. And although 7.9% may not look much better than 7.4%, you're looking at roughly 2 more free throws a game difference. And in the NBA, on average, you're looking at about 24 games per year that you go into the last 5 minutes of the game where it's plus or minus 2 points. So fine line, and that can definitely be the difference between winning and losing from a point standpoint. The other thing, and I think drawing fouls cannot be overstated, because if you get one of the other team's best players in foul trouble and your better players play more than their better players, you've got a better chance to win. And when we're looking to penetrate, spacing is the most important thing. And however you define your alignment, whether it's a 4-out, 1-in, or a 5-out alignment, those are the most common in the NBA. And, you know, if you've got more shooting, 5-out may be better. But understanding how you want to space is critical. But regardless of what you're spacing, it's better to be too high, too wide, too far apart, too spaced. Better to overspace than underspace. And when we're looking to –
Sean, I got a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so just going kind of back to your talk about rim runner in terms of like big head of the ball, how important do you see it, less in relation to the ball, but more in relation to X5, right? Advantage rim run when you're ahead of X5 versus when X5 is all the way back.
Same to you. Nothing better than that.
Nothing better.
I think it's
Absolutely.
something that can be really, really strong, especially because if he can bring a small to guard him and you can get a big on the perimeter early, that can be one of those advantage or matchup situations that's, advantageous for your offense. Now, if you're a team like Milwaukee and you feel better with Bledsoe or Antetokounmpo driving the ball and giving them as much space as possible, and a guy like Lopez can take 6 threes a game and shoot them well, it may be better for him to space the floor. So, again, depends on your team, but I do think there's a place for the rim runner. I do think if that guy can sprint his ass off and get down there and seal a small, it can be a hell of a weapon for you.
I guess one of my questions, too, would piggyback, not to get hung up, but your numbers here in terms of driving within the first 10 seconds of the clock, right? So let's say we don't rim run when we have an advantage, X5's down. and now we bring our 5-man down into that area, does that discourage that early penetration as far as breaking the paint to give us that 1.17 yield in the first 10 seconds?
It can, especially if it's on the strong side of the floor. You know, the more your bigs or whomever is on that strong side block, you're going to see more bodies and you're less likely to get that early penetration. Not to say that it can't be done, and how you space accordingly, you know, whether it's going to the dots on the penetration, then diving, or if that guy goes out to the perimeter, whatever it may be, you know, to me, it just depends on what your team is and how you want to play in that regard. But in terms of the penetration game, like to your question, I think, and this goes right along with what you're saying about the big being on the strong side, is we talked about the spacing part, but you want to look for gaps. You know, where is the gap, and the bigger the gap, the better. So, for example, here you see the ball being pushed up the floor, and on this cross-court pass, and I think two things help you with your gaps, and part of the reason why you see a higher success rate early in the clock is the amount of space that you have. So on this cross-court throw-ahead, you see how wide open the middle is. And to your point there on the question is, if Otto Porter were to go to the strong side block here instead of running through and away from the ball, giving the ball space, it's less likely that Oubre is going to be able to drive the ball and get to the basket to make the shot or draw the foul. Another example here of being into the front court early and looking to attack as big a gap as possible. You see nobody's back, that open area, and then looking to attack and get to the rim. Now, a couple points with gaps. When you're running the floor, and you'll see a compare and contrast here. Here, we have a single gap. The gap is small. The wing runner did not get to the deep corner. And although Andre Miller is able to make a hell of an in and out move and get to the rim, there's less space for him to do that. Compare that here to Jason Terry. Excuse me 1 second.
Sweeney, let me just also interject.
Go ahead.
Hey guys, do me a favor when you do chime in, please identify yourselves so we can. That would be helpful. Appreciate it.
Oh, come on. Let me see if I can get out of this real quick here, fellas. Give me 1 second.
Also, if anyone wants a copy of this, I'll put my email in the group chat. You can just send me an email, and I'll send anyone that wants it a copy of the recording of the clinic.
All right. Can we all see this again? Sorry about that, fellas and ladies. You see here the smaller gap, and obviously a great drive, but compare that to here, the wing runner getting all the way to the corner up at the top of the screen here, Jason Terry getting all the way to that dead corner. Now that gives Brogdon more space to attack the paint and ultimately get to the rim. So the bigger the gap, the better. And one other thing too here, you see Middleton cutting through is going to give Antetokounmpo more space to get back to his right hand. Gasol less likely to leave a shooter. Lopez on the strong side of the floor. And now Antetokounmpo is able to get all the way to the rim. So the bigger the gap, the better. In terms of driving the basketball, ideally, we know you want to be a straight line driver. So when possible, we want to maximize our efficiency. We want to do as little dribbling as possible, and we want to keep things as simple as we can. And so when we drive that ball, we want to open up our defenders' hips. We want to go in a straight line. One, because it allows us a better opportunity to draw a foul like you see here. The quick, hard drive, our shoulder is dropped into that defender. and he's not in a legal guarding position, so it gives us an opportunity to get the foul. And then the other thing here, you see Ginobili, economy of motion with the ball on the catch, not hesitating, putting his knee through Durant's knee, causing him to open up and getting to the basket. So doing it as efficient as possible, making sure that there's economy of motion and getting to the rim as quickly as we can. Another thing you want to do when we have the ball, as we know, is we want to read the defense. So we want to have our eyes up. We want to see the floor. And as a general rule, if there's one guy on the ball, it means drive it and look to finish. If we can't finish, keep our dribble. If there's two on the ball, we want to pass. So anytime we get that second defender, we want to pass the ball. Here with Antetokounmpo, he sees the gap is to the baseline, and the second defender is not able to get there in time. So obviously we're going to try to get all the way to the rim and finish. And it's a little bit different if you're 7 feet tall with a 7'6" wingspan than if you're 6'2" with a 6'2" wingspan. Another example here of reading the defense, Parker in this case gets the second defender to commit to the ball. And now it's his job to read where the help is and where it isn't and make the good decision. Now, a few things when you're talking about the penetration game that stand out, especially off the ball. And I think there's 4 key points. Number 1, get to space. You want to space to your range, but you always want to give that ball more room to breathe. So that way your defender has to make a choice whether to help or not. Second point, get in the vision of the passer. You want to present yourself with both, your spot on the floor, and then the third point with a verbal and a visual target. Talk on defense, talk on offense. Make sure that you're down and ready to shoot with your hands, and then use your voice to help that ball handler. And then the fourth thing is you want to make quick decisions. We want to be ready to play 0.5 mentality, step into your shot, your drive, your pass, whatever it may be, but we want to make quick decisions without holding the basketball. So good example here, as the baseline penetration occurs, you see at the bottom of the screen here, Wesley Matthews has got his hand up right now, which is great, but he's not in the vision of the passer. So as we all know, baseline drive, baseline drift, this hand target is great, but what's much better is spacing to your range and having your hands and feet ready to shoot the basketball as he does here, where the passer can see him and deliver the ball. Another important point on the penetration is being ready to shoot, drive, and pass on the catch, as we talked about. So here you see Andre Miller looking to attack, getting off of it, and then without hesitation, we're getting multiple paint touches playing on the catch. And then Miller here, knowing that he's not a shooter, he's a driver and a cutter, is on the move to the rim, ready to finish in one motion. Another example of here being ready to shoot, drive, and pass on the catch. And this penetration occurs a little bit later into the clock, but you watch here as the ball gets swung around to Blake Griffin, he's stepping into the pass and beating the defense's rotation. The ball moves faster than the defense can rotate, and right here he delivers an on-time, on-target pass. You see fundamentally sound stepping into it and getting rid of it without hesitation to Galloway in the corner. Multiple penetrations are critical, and the best way to do that is not allow the defense to get set. And this is a great possession to me of that. Obviously, we see unselfish play. We see the ball not stopping at all, and the defense is never really allowed to get set, and we see multiple paint touches. If the ball touches the paint once, it's going to be really hard for the defense. If the ball touches the paint multiple times and you can make good decisions, it's going to be virtually impossible for the defense to keep up with it, as we see here. So the quicker our decisions are, the better. And another example of quick decisions would be this one here. Again, coming back to Griffin at the top of the floor, you see the kick out occur, the ball gets swung. We see another extra pass here to the top, and even versus the short closeout, we go back to that economy of motion, that simple basketball. Griffin doesn't hold the ball, and you see how he opens Tatum's hips up almost immediately, And then getting back to that first point on penetration, spacing, space to your range, know who you are. Drummond gets under the defense here and puts himself in a position to catch and finish in one motion, not allowing that defense to catch up and stop him from getting to the rim. So those are some main points, in my opinion, that regardless of how you set up your penetration or your draw and kick game, that stand out. Now, a few questions I think that you have to identify to eliminate gray for your team as best as you can and keep things simple is what are your rules, both on middle penetration and baseline penetration? And then how do we slide on the penetration? How do we space away? Do we want that baseline drive, baseline drift? Do we cut? Do we stay spaced? Do we have our deep players working under the defense? What are our rules and what are our players' skills? And then after that, it's the looks that you prioritize. When you're teaching your team how to drive and kick, you've got to have a progression so that they know whether it's the drop off, then to the drift, then to the guy in the slot, whatever it may be for your penetration looks, you've got to prioritize where you want the ball to go when that help occurs. And then another important point is how do you respace? Do you follow your momentum to the space? Do you get out opposite the ball? And what's most likely to distort the help and give your teammate a chance to redrive the basketball? Now, one of the things that defenses will look to do oftentimes to keep the ball from being penetrated is switch. So we know, we've all been coaching, we've all been doing this thing for a while. The switch helps keep a body in front of a body. It helps you from from having to bring two to the basketball. And in the NBA, regardless of what team you're with, in the last 6 minutes of the game, every team is more likely to switch than they are during the first 42 minutes of the game. So how you attack those switches is critical. Three main ways in my mind, and there's obviously exceptions to these, but three main ways to me are, number one, continue to play. And this is going to leave a little bit more to chance, but it's going to keep the defense from being able to lock in. So do we keep that ball moving, look to attack closeouts, redrive the ball, whatever it may be? How do we keep playing? If you're with the Warriors and you're Stephen Curry, you would pass and then run off a pin down, knowing that the big can't chase you off the screens. Second way is attacking with that ball handler, whether it's playing to a mismatch or looking to drive a switch, whatever it may be, coming in with a second pick and roll. Attacking with the ball handler would be obviously a great way to attack the switch. And then the third way would be with the screen setter, whether that's a roll, a slip, a pop, go to a spot in ISO or post, whatever it may be, looking to attack that switch with the screener. Some example of those would be here. This would be an example of continuing to play. Ginobili and Aldridge are running a pick and roll, and they get a switch. And without hesitation, Ginobili gets off the ball and passes it to Danny Green, who can drive a closeout. And as you see here, before this pass is made, you see the defender with his hands on his knees. Ginobili reading the weak side, doesn't hesitate, gets off the ball, and allows his teammate to attack that closeout and get to the rim. Another example here of continuing to play and why this is a good option is you see the switch occur between Collins and Reddish, and now Atlanta's big, their center is on the perimeter, and they have a small at the rim, and without hesitation, you see Small's inside, not as good a help defenders, not looking to help across. He steps up to help, and Martin attacking the closeout immediately, giving Biyombo an easy opportunity under the defense. Now, when you're playing to attack the switch with the ball handler, a great option if you're playing with a ball handler that can both drive and shoot is to look to immediately drive that switch. So you see here, Lowry is a very good shooter, especially coming off to his left hand. So Thomas has to jump switch, and Lowry, without hesitation, drops his shoulder and looks to attack the paint, causing a second defender to come and forcing a rotation, getting his teammate an open look or a redrive if he wanted it. Another example here of attacking with the ball handler is Chicago going to run a dribble handoff here between White and the player coming out of the corner here, Porter. They know the switch is occurring, and we look to keep it and split the switch. And then White does a good job here of making the correct decision, passing to a shooter on the perimeter. Another example here of driving the switch, Irving going against Livingston and Barnes, like sizes. We know the switch is going to occur, so we look to immediately attack and get to a spot to shoot before the help defense can get there. One other way here to attack is to get off the ball immediately and get it back. And we've seen this, whether you call it a boomerang, whatever it may be. Doncic forces the switch here, and now he gives it up and gets it back with a live dribble, ready to attack the big who switched on to him. We get our spacing right, and he looks to attack, draw the defense, and make the right decision. And then lastly, with attacking with the ball handler, something that is critical, especially as we get into late game situations and possessions become at a premium, is our big can rebound versus a small. So here Ginobili looks to attack, and because Aldridge is against the small and they have to help, he's able to get the tip in. The second, quick pick and roll versus a switch. So here we see Durant and Green run a quick pick and roll to get the primary defender off the ball, and then we run a quick second pick and roll to put a big that doesn't want to switch onto the ball handler. Another example here almost looks like the same play. Get the primary defender off and run a second pick and roll immediately versus a big that doesn't want to switch. So looking to attack that switch with the second pick and roll. Couple of important points when you're running pick and rolls and looking to play to the screener. You see here the Simmons-Dedmon pick and roll and the angle at which Dedmon sets that screen. He gets beneath the on-ball defender, making it harder for him to switch under. And then you see here the on-time, on-target pass. We draw the big, stepping up, and as we fake high and pass low, the roller has an opportunity to get to the rim. Another example here of attacking to the roller as this pick and roll situation develops. You see Aldridge screening the underside of the defense. And even though Capella is going to try to body up and come together on this switch, talking and touching, Gordon cannot get under the roller, and Aldridge is able to roll behind the defense. And then here you'd see a great example of playing to the switch and the post up, and then making the correct decision when the double team comes. So here you see the switch occur. You see Gobert coming across to trap on the baseline side. But because we are alert to this and we make the quick decision, Hood or Johnson cannot get there in time to the cutting Iguodala. So playing to the roller and then making the correct decision. Now, regardless of how you want to play against the switch, spacing is critical. And the one alignment I'd like to talk about here is 3 on one side and 1 on the other in terms of our spacing. So here you see a switch forced, and Griffin has the ball in the middle of the floor. It's going to be hard to double team him. We've got a sizable gap to his right hand, and 5 is inside in the dunker. So now as Griffin looks to attack the switch, you see the help occur, and both the 5, Pachulia, and the 1, Reggie Jackson, move on the penetration and the help occurring, which puts LA in a tough spot, and Griffin makes an on-time, on-target pass to the shooter in the corner. Here you see another example of 3-and-1 spacing with the 5 on the perimeter and a small in the dunker. So this puts Curry as the low man. It puts Maurice Spates at the top of the floor guarding a shooter in Love, and it makes it harder for the defense to help. And then also it allows us a better chance to rebound offensively versus a small, because Curry versus Shumpert here is not as good as Spates versus Love. And then lastly here for your 3-and-1 spacing is weak side movement. You see James giving the ball up and getting it back, and Golden State, being a team that switched a lot at this point, is pretty good at, one, guarding the ball, and then two, being alert behind it. But by using some weak side movement, we distort that help and make it where the help defender is a little bit too worried about his own man and isn't able to get there to stop the ball in time. So regardless of what it is you want to do to attack the switch, some things that you've got to identify is, one, how do you want to do it? And then who has the best mismatch? Is it better for that big to drive the small, or the small to drive the big, or the big to post up versus the small? And regardless of the plan, the later in the game, as teams become more likely to switch, there's a huge emphasis that's got to be placed on your execution and ultimately playing to your strengths and being able to keep things simple. And so that would be my thoughts on the running game and penetration and ultimately switching attack. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it. But those are some things that stand out to me, and I'd open up to questions or thoughts that any of you guys have at this point.
Sean, Matt McCall from UMass here. Just quick question: like, if you have a front court player, when you're going into your transition game and you want to start getting into penetration, and you're playing with Andre Drummond, okay, and he's trailing the play, so he's the rebounder, okay, and he's trailing as the ball's getting advanced up the floor. What rules do you have for him as he's coming across half court? Are you up screening for him to get him in the post? Are you telling him to stay spaced? Is he setting an immediate pick and roll and rolling to the basket? What are you doing with him if you're trying to get into this penetration stuff and he's trailing the play?
Well, I think you can do a couple of different things, but what we would tell him is if he weren't running into one of our triggers, whether it be a wide pin down or a quick pick and roll, is to get under the defense and get opposite the ball, just to try to give that ball as much opportunity to, get into the paint. So, whatever it may be, whether you're a team that likes to run drags for your primary ball handler, or, get into, a ball reversal to the second side. If you have a big that's able to get the ball and trail and then drive it, whatever it may be, we generally speaking, I would say, would prefer, if your big is not a post threat, to get under and opposite the ball, sort of like the old dribble drive motion, Vance Wahlberg type mentality. Not a shooter, not a guy that we necessarily want posting up early. So you've either got to occupy the defense on the weak side by a screening action or get under and opposite.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Sean, Sam Newman back from the Iowa Wolves. What's up, buddy? Going back to your kind of penetration and respacing, obviously in the NBA, we have a limited shot clock. What's kind of been your thoughts or what's your preferences in terms of the respace action? Do you think it's more of a read the situation, or would you prefer to, define rules about respacing?
Yeah. I think it kind of, depends on your team, but in general, if we can have some basic guidelines and give guys, rules or principles, that's going to help us better coach them and better teach them how we want to play. And, places I've been before and things I've seen, I was always follow your momentum to the space, but more teams I've seen now, including us in Detroit, is get opposite the pass. And, similar to like how Toronto does or what Case did with his teams in the past, I think that's really effective too. So whatever it is and whatever your rules are, the one thing is if you do give them rules, or if you do give them principles, it's going to give them some structure, and ultimately it's going to help you coach them. But again, the smarter your players are, they may be better at just let them go play. So.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yep.
Sean, it's Casey Hill. So one question I have, like you went through all your thoughts and ideas and the things that you've seen. What, in your opinion, with today's NBA, with the lack of practice, that we can really have in terms of reinforcing your way of playing, in terms of holding your players accountable to how you want to play. How would you say is the most efficient way of doing that now?
Well, I almost think you've got to have 2 practices within one practice. If you've got the load management guys, they've got one version of what's taking place. And then if you've got the young guys or the low minute guys, they've got another version of what's taking place. And I think walkthrough is really, really critical. If complexity is the enemy of execution, keeping things as simple as possible and making it straightforward is critical. How you use your shoot-arounds is, hey, in practice, these guys are going to get held out. But for the game, they're going to be able to go through shoot-arounds. So we've got to use that shoot-around time almost as like a quasi-practice to get those guys on the floor so that we can get our reps. And then you're counting on the guys that are veterans and experienced and know what they're doing to not skip steps, to understand what you want and what's going to be the most effective. So that way when they get in the games, their experience and their talent takes over and they're not lost. But I mean, you guys are dealing with it there. I mean, that would be, you guys, I'm sure, have some great thoughts on that as well.
It's always been a bit of an equation to try to solve. Always try to get other people's thoughts on it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sean, this is Rex Walters. How much time will you guys spend working on different actions, like just to give them a framework in terms of what to run, like drags, double drags, wide singles, do you guys spend, in your first few days of training camp, what will you guys do to kind of talk about some actions that fit your personnel, and how much time will you spend on it?
It's dependent on the year. But in general, if you've got a new team that hasn't played as much together, it might be a little bit more time. I mean, I always err on the side of like slower, methodical teaching. And the more veteran group you have, they may not want as much as we know. But, to me, it's like, what they want and what they need can be 2 different things. So, we've got to make sure that we do a good job of putting things in. In terms of the basic breakdown, I personally am a big 5-on-0 guy. And I think that's something that you can do every day. Contact, no contact, played the night before, didn't play the night before. And then also your 3-on-0 breakdowns. I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I go back to when I worked for Ben Jacobson at Northern Iowa or Marty Simmons at Evansville. There was a lot of that, and it was effective. And the teams I've been around in the NBA, nothing's different. I mean, shit, back when I was watching you at USF, Marks and Broward were running over to your practices. Like that was something that stood out to me. Was like, we've got to make sure we know what we're doing, whether we have contact or not. And ultimately, it depends on are they getting it or not.
Sean, Cody Topper with the University of Memphis. Just on all these various options, right? Like, let's say that a team is switching going into a game, right? Are you playing personnel versus like, hey, okay, if we want to attack with the ball handler, like, let's look to boomerang these guys tonight, with our whichever guy that makes sense to do, or hey, like, if they're switching screens with Blake or whoever it is, like, we're going to this look. How much are you scripting those out?
I mean, I think it depends. Again, I always go back to when I worked for Avery Johnson. He would always go system, game plan, and then tendencies, whether it's offense or defense. And as much as you can, stick to your system. Each night you're going to have specific things that you've got a game plan for, whether it be offense or defense. And then lastly, you're going to have tendencies both for yourself and your opponent. So, if you feel like you can just stick to, hey, we want to keep the ball moving, and that's our system, that's great. But then you're going to get against the teams that are pretty good defenses, and you're going to say, hey, Blake's going to have advantage if they're going to switch 1-4 pick and rolls tonight. So we're going to address that as shoot around and, make sure that everybody knows when we call whatever, shake 4 or whatever it may be, here's the spacing we want, here's how they're going to guard it, and then ultimately here's how we're going to look to attack it. But I always, in my mind, go back to system, game plan, tendencies.
From Catholic University, to piggyback on that, your ball screen coverage, do you have that based on the system, the game plan, or based on tendencies?
Same thing as like, here's how we want to play things in general. And then for certain teams, we're going to have to game plan and adjust based on the great player or things that they do. And then lastly, we've got to know everybody's tendencies. So your system, you would hope as much as you can, you want to stick to that. But I think the better the team becomes, and especially with the amount of skill that teams are putting on the floor, defensive versatility and being able to have contingencies is of the utmost importance. And then you got to know the tendencies as best you can, what this guy likes to do. And ultimately, what shot are we willing to live with?
What do you teach then in like your preseason? What's your baseball? Do you have a baseball screen coverage, or how often would you switch it based on a game?
I mean, to me, it's a need-based decision, and that's twofold. One, it's how good are you at what you do, and then ultimately, how good is your opponent at attacking it? In general, the easiest is this is what we do. We worry about ourselves. We don't change, but that's unrealistic to think that you can do that every night unless you've got the team that, has the versatility or the athletic ability or the tenacity to do it. If you're most teams, you're going to have to make some adjustments and ultimately, play through some game plan situations and some tendencies. If you're like Houston was a few years ago where they said, hey, fuck it, we're going to switch 1 through 5 and we're going to put 120 on your ass, try and keep up. That's one thing, but a lot of times your offense or your personnel isn't able to just do that.
Yeah, Igor used to say Ryan Anderson's ball screen coverage was or had to be make 5 threes.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you guys letting me talk, and Ryan and Brian, thanks a ton.
Any other questions, guys, before we wrap up?
Sean, I got one. So say there's a really bad oh, sorry, Charles Clask, Nuggets.
Yes,
Say there's
sir.
a really bad defender on the other team, and regardless of the play, you just want to bring him into the action to get the switch, like we saw in those Golden State clips.
Yep.
Do you have to put something into your system? Do you tell guys, hey, this guy is the ghost, we're attacking the goat? What, how do they know?
Well, like when I worked for Avery, he would have horns down bad defender as a play call, and he would identify before the game who the bad defender was, and you knew that was going to be a step up with that guy in the action. Depending on where you are, who your players are. As Charles, like the smart ball handler may just be able to recognize it and just call it. But if they're not able to do that, then having something in particular in your package might be worthwhile.
Sean, I got a quick question. This is Nick Irvin,
Yes,
Morgan Park High School. Is it best for when you run the double drag action, is it best for the guard to set the screen first or the big?
Depends on what you're trying to get done. Most times you're going to see a small set it first and the 5 set the second one because it's less likely to get that switch on the second one. But, depending on what you're trying to attack, if you're trying to attack a mismatch, maybe you want that switch to be the second screener. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. But from what I've seen, and I defer to the other guys on there, that have some thoughts on it. But to me, generally speaking, you're going to see either those two guys stacked or the small coming first and the big coming second.
Okay.
Sean, Jim Morant, Portland Trailblazers. Just to kind of piggyback off Charles' comment. So you're going into your walkthrough, you're doing your 5-on-0. Now you know they're going to be switching every ball screen during the game. How much of that do you address kind of as a team and say, hey, we're going to go through these plays, but just know that they're going to switch. It's going to be an ISO game. And how much of it do you just kind of like, all right, let's go through these plays, but let's pull, our dominant ball handlers aside and just let them know what's going on?
I mean, my opinion was I'd like to have as many guys on the floor and know what the fuck we're doing as possible. So if we can, go through it and address it, obviously like a lot of places now you've got video guys that are out there guarding and doing that, just giving guys an idea of what they're going to see to me is best. But, your team or other team, you may feel more comfortable with like, hey, you two guys, you got to know what the hell the deal is and be able to manage it, but I always err on the side of the more prepared we are, the better off we're going to be.
Hey, Sean, David Gale here in Germany right now. I got a question for you. What are the tendencies you're seeing with off-ball switching? I know over here in Europe, there's a ton of off-ball switching going on. So like the example you showed with the Cavs at the end there, where LeBron attacked with the weak side movement to distort the help side. Over here, there's a ton of triple flips or screen-to-screener guys flipping and just kind of zoning up a lot right now.
Yeah, and I'd see, you see the same thing. I mean, some teams still, you guard your guy and you shrink the floor based on, the positioning of your man. And, other teams, like I'd say you see more and more kind of inverting or switching the nail, the old, Casey's term there, but like trying to make sure that we're in the shrink and just making sure we have boxes and elbows covered and zoning up on the backside.
It's good. Good to hear Case is still using the same terms.
Anybody else, guys? Appreciate everybody joining today. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Have a great day.
Guys, take care. Have a good day. Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
We have the recording if anybody wants.